In the early hours of April 26, 1986, the quiet town of Pripyat slept beneath a sky filled with invisible danger. At 1:23 a.m., an explosion ripped through reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, unleashing a force more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. A blue flash lit the horizon, and within seconds, a cloud of radioactive particles began to drift silently into the night air. Firefighters rushed toward the inferno, unaware they were stepping into an invisible storm. The graphite blocks from the reactor core glowed eerily on the ground, emitting lethal doses of radiation. In the chaos, alarms blared, concrete melted, and the once secure corridors of Soviet engineering crumbled under the weight of catastrophe. Within hours, the city of Pripyat began to stir. People stood on their balconies, watching the distant fire as if it were a spectacle. Children pointed at the strange blue glow in the sky. But the light they saw wasn't a sunrise. It was radiation ionizing the air. It was death disguised as dawn. Animals were the first to sense the danger. Birds fled their nests in frantic swarms, disoriented and erratic. Cows refused to eat. Dogs barked incessantly at the reactor, as if warning their human companions. By sunrise, the quiet forests surrounding Chernobyl were alive with confusion. In the days that followed, the Soviet Union ordered the evacuation of Pripyat. More than 49,000 people were told to leave their homes, believing they'd return in a few days. They never did. Their belongings, photographs, and pets were left behind, frozen in time. The city became a ghost town. And as humans fled, nature remained. Within weeks, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, a 30-kilometer radius around the reactor, became one of the most radioactive places on Earth. Birds fell from the sky, small mammals perished in burrows, and the trees closest to the blast turned a sickly reddish-brown hue. This place would later be called the Red Forest, a graveyard of pines turned crimson by radiation. But radiation doesn't kill everything immediately. It mutates, it lingers, it reshapes life at its core. And in the silent aftermath of Chernobyl, a new kind of world began to emerge, one where evolution would accelerate in strange, unpredictable ways. The first scientists who entered the zone described it as a landscape of contradiction, deathly still, yet teeming with change. For every dead animal they found, they also encountered survivors, strange survivors, creatures that bore marks of the invisible energy that had coursed through the soil, air, and water. Chernobyl had become more than a disaster site. It had become an accidental laboratory of evolution. And in that laboratory, the laws of nature were rewriting themselves. When the last buses left Pripyat, they carried away more than its people. They carried away time itself. Within days, the streets fell silent, playgrounds emptied, and apartment blocks stood like tombstones of a lost civilization. But where humans saw danger, nature saw opportunity. Stray dogs roamed the streets, their paws leaving prints in radioactive dust. Horses escaped abandoned stables. Wild boars ventured from nearby forests, digging through empty yards. The city's edges became hunting grounds, and apartment balconies turned into nesting sites. In the absence of people, the natural world began to reclaim its territory. Plants grew through concrete cracks. Trees sprouted from rooftops. Grass overtook football fields and schoolyards. What was once a symbol of Soviet progress was now an eerie monument to decay. Yet, in that decay, life flourished. At first, scientists expected the area to become a biological wasteland. But when biologists returned years later, they were stunned. The exclusion zone had transformed into something unexpected, a thriving, though distorted, ecosystem. Yet not everything was as it seemed. Many of the animals exhibited signs of genetic damage. Birds with misshapen beaks, insects with extra limbs, and small rodents showing tumor-like growths were found across the most irradiated zones. However, not all mutations were visible. Some changes hid deep within DNA, passed quietly from one generation to the next. Still, despite these mutations, the population of wildlife continued to grow. With humans gone, predators returned. Wolves, lynx, eagles, and foxes. Deer roamed freely through city squares. Beavers rebuilt rivers once polluted by industry. The land that was poisoned became, paradoxically, one of Europe's most vibrant wildlife reserves. This paradox raised questions that scientists are still trying to answer. How could life thrive in a place so deadly? Were these animals truly adapting or merely surviving in slow decay? Chernobyl was no longer just a story of disaster. It was a story of nature's resilience and mutation intertwined. In this abandoned world, evolution seemed to move at a different pace. The zone became a time capsule, a glimpse of what Earth might look like without human interference, but also a warning of what happens when human ambition goes too far. The forests whispered with strange vitality, the rivers reflected a haunting beauty, and through it all, unseen, the radiation pulsed. Invisible, eternal. Chernobyl was alive, but it was not the same world anymore.
Radiation is invisible, odorless, and silent, but its effects ripple through the very fabric of life. To understand the mutated animals of Chernobyl, we must first understand what radiation does at the smallest scale, the molecular level. When the Chernobyl reactor exploded, it released a cocktail of radioisotopes: cesium-137, strontium-90, iodine-131, and plutonium-239. Each behaves differently, but all share one property. They emit energy powerful enough to damage the DNA that encodes every living thing's blueprint. DNA is remarkably resilient, constantly repairing itself from everyday damage. But in Chernobyl, the radiation dose was so high that the repair mechanisms were overwhelmed. Strands of DNA broke apart. Sometimes, when cells tried to repair themselves, they made mistakes, duplications, deletions, or misplacements of genetic material. Those mistakes became mutations. Most mutations are harmful. Some kill cells outright, others cause deformities, sterility, or cancer. Yet occasionally, a mutation provides a tiny advantage, a subtle change that allows an organism to survive in its new, hostile environment. In Chernobyl, survival itself became a form of selection. Scientists like Dr. Timothy Mousseau and Dr. Anders Moeller ventured into the exclusion zone in the 1990s, studying how radiation shaped local wildlife. They counted birds, trapped rodents, and analyzed insects. What they found was a tapestry of genetic chaos. In high radiation zones, the rate of physical abnormalities increased dramatically. White spots on black feathers, tumors in small mammals, reduced brain size in birds, and even sterility in insects. The pattern was clear. The closer to the reactor, the more severe the effects. But the most unsettling discovery was not the mutations themselves, it was how quickly nature adapted to them. Within a few generations, certain species seemed to stabilize. Some birds began producing extra melanin, a dark pigment that absorbs radiation and reduces DNA damage. Blacker birds, once rare, now had a survival edge. Nature, it seemed, was conducting its own experiment in evolution under fire. The Chernobyl zone became a living reminder that evolution doesn't only happen over millennia, it can happen in decades when the pressure is strong enough. Yet this adaptation came with a cost. For every animal that evolved resistance, countless others perished or bore offspring too weak to survive. Mutation and extinction danced in uneasy balance. The scientists studying this phenomenon often described an eerie feeling, walking through a world both vibrant and corrupted. The forests looked lush, but every leaf, every bird call carried the invisible signature of radiation. Life had not simply returned, it had mutated to endure. Chernobyl had become a natural experiment humanity could never ethically design, and the results would challenge everything we knew about resilience. Among all the creatures that returned to Chernobyl, none captured the world's imagination like the wolves. For centuries, wolves symbolized the wild, cunning, fierce, untamed. After the disaster, as humans withdrew, they moved in, reclaiming their ancestral hunting grounds. By the early 2000s, the wolf population inside the exclusion zone was estimated to be up to 7 times higher than in surrounding reserves. At first glance, they appeared normal, strong, gray, and lean, haunting the ruins of Pripyat in silent packs. But closer observation revealed differences. Some had slightly enlarged organs, others altered fur coloration, and many carried higher levels of radioactive isotopes in their bones. Yet the wolves thrived. Biologists tagged and tracked them with GPS collars, expecting limited range and reduced reproduction. Instead, they discovered that these wolves were healthy breeders with wide territories, some even venturing beyond the zone into Belarus and Ukraine. Radiation didn't keep them confined, it merely marked them. Why did they flourish while other species struggled? Part of the answer lies in the absence of humans. With no hunters, no deforestation, and no agriculture, prey populations exploded. Deer, elk, and boar roamed freely. For wolves, the exclusion zone became a paradise of opportunity. Radiation was a danger, but humans, historically their greatest threat, were gone. Still, genetic studies revealed subtle anomalies, shifts in immune system genes, increased rates of chromosomal rearrangements, and signs of oxidative stress. The wolves of Chernobyl were not mutants in the monstrous sense, but their biology bore silent scars, an invisible inheritance from the reactor's fire. Researchers often described watching them move through fog-shrouded forests and crumbling villages, their howls echoing through cooling towers. To see wolves thriving here was both inspiring and unsettling. They were proof that nature could reclaim even the most poisoned lands, but also proof that our greatest disasters never truly end. Each wolf that runs through the radioactive pines carries a legacy written in altered genes. Future generations will bear those changes, for better or worse. The wolves of the zone are both survivors and specters, guardians of a world that humans abandoned, living evidence of resilience forged in contamination. The skies above Chernobyl tell another story, one written in feathers. In the years following the explosion, ornithologists noticed peculiar trends among birds living near the reactor. Species diversity was lower in the most contaminated areas, but those that remained exhibited strange traits, patchy plumage, abnormal beaks, and even reduced song complexity. Dr. Moeller and Dr. Mousseau's long-term studies revealed that birds exposed to high radiation had smaller brains and shorter lifespans. Many species showed high rates of sterility and malformed offspring. Yet, amid this genetic struggle, certain species began to evolve visible defenses. One of the most striking changes was in the color of their feathers. Birds such as barn swallows and great tits developed darker plumage due to increased melanin production. Melanin acts like a natural sunscreen, protecting against ionizing radiation by neutralizing free radicals. Blacker birds, once rare, now had a survival edge. Evolution in real time. This adaptation came with a trade-off.
Darker birds required more energy to maintain their pigment, meaning they struggled in low food years. Yet their survival proved that even in the heart of catastrophe, life seeks balance. Other birds displayed behavioral shifts. Some species avoided nesting near the reactor, as if instinctively aware of danger. Others changed their mating calls, possibly a sign of neurological impact. The forests grew quieter, filled not with song, but with the eerie hum of wind over rusted power lines. Yet, paradoxically, in areas of lower contamination, bird populations flourished. With no human interference, vast nesting grounds opened up. Storks built nests atop abandoned power poles. Owls hunted over silent fields. The story of Chernobyl's birds is not one of monsters, but of survivors. Creatures reshaped by radiation and circumstance, each generation carrying subtle marks of adaptation. Their blackened feathers are both shield and scar, reminders of nature's desperate ingenuity and humanity's irreversible mistake. Beneath the still waters surrounding the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, another world evolved, quiet, murky, and profoundly changed. In the cooling ponds and rivers near the reactor, scientists discovered some of the most fascinating and disturbing examples of how radiation reshapes life. After the disaster, these waters became repositories for radioactive isotopes, especially cesium-137 and strontium-90, which settled into the silt. Fish, plankton, and aquatic plants absorbed them, creating a radioactive food chain that persists to this day. Local legends speak of giant catfish lurking in the cooling ponds, monstrous, pale creatures, meters long, feeding in silence. While myths exaggerated their size, science confirmed that many fish in Chernobyl's waters grew unusually large. However, it wasn't due to mutation in the cinematic sense. The truth was simpler. With no fishermen and no predators, they lived longer, eating abundantly in the absence of human disturbance. Still, their tissues told another story. Studies revealed high radiation concentrations in bone and muscle. Genetic tests showed subtle mutations affecting growth regulation and immune function. Some fish developed deformed spines, others abnormal pigmentation or tumor-like swellings. Microscopic life was even more dramatically affected. Plankton, the base of the aquatic food web, exhibited shortened life cycles and irregular cell division. Some species vanished completely, replaced by more radiation-resistant varieties. The entire ecosystem shifted, reorganizing itself around survival. Yet, as years passed, researchers noticed signs of stabilization. Radiation levels in water dropped as isotopes decayed and sediments trapped contaminants. Fish populations grew denser. New species moved in from uncontaminated rivers. The waters of Chernobyl became paradoxically rich, biologically diverse, yet toxic at their core. Standing by the riverbank, one sees a mirror of contradictions. Shimmering water that hides danger beneath beauty. Thriving life built on invisible decay. Chernobyl's fish tell a story that echoes through the entire zone. That life, when stripped of human interference, does not vanish. It adapts, mutates, and evolves into something new, even in poisoned waters. But the mutation carries a quiet cost. No one knows what these changes mean for the generations still to come. The legacy of radiation lingers in the genetic code, unseen but unforgotten. Just west of the reactor lies a haunting landscape, the Red Forest, one of the most contaminated places on Earth. When the explosion occurred, the radioactive plumes swept across a pine forest, showering it with lethal doses of radiation. Within hours, the needles turned a deep reddish brown. The trees stood dead but upright, a ghostly monument to invisible fire. Soviet soldiers bulldozed them into mass graves, burying radioactive timber beneath the soil. Yet even after death, the forest refused to fade. Over time, a strange new ecosystem took root. The soil remained contaminated, but seeds still germinated. Mutant saplings sprouted with twisted trunks and split leaves. Some trees grew faster than normal, others failed to grow at all. The microbial life that decomposes organic matter, fungi, bacteria, and insects, was severely impaired, leaving fallen logs to persist for decades, undecayed. This disrupted the forest's natural cycle. Without proper decomposition, nutrients remained locked in the dead wood, altering plant chemistry and reshaping the entire ecosystem. Scientists who walk through the Red Forest describe it as eerily quiet. The usual chorus of birds and insects is faint or absent. Radiation has silenced much of the life that would normally fill the air. Geiger counters click steadily, a mechanical heartbeat in the stillness. Yet despite its deathly reputation, the forest has become a paradoxical sanctuary. In the shadows of twisted pines, foxes, elk, and even brown bears have returned. Their paw prints mark the same soil where radiation once burned the earth sterile. The forest lives, though changed, an emblem of resilience born from catastrophe. But its silence carries meaning. It is not the peace of balance, but the hush of survival. Every gust of wind stirs radioactive dust. Every new tree draws its life from poisoned ground. The Red Forest stands as a natural monument, a living reminder that the consequences of human recklessness cannot be buried, only endured. In the decades since the explosion, the Exclusion Zone has transformed from a wasteland into an unexpected wilderness. Deer graze in the shadows of crumbling apartment blocks. Bears fish in radioactive rivers. Beavers have rebuilt dams that rerouted entire waterways. The wolf population continues to flourish, rivaling protected reserves across Europe. For many visitors, Chernobyl appears as a strange success story, proof that nature heals when humans retreat. But the truth is more complex. What has emerged is not restoration, but adaptation. Scientists studying the region found that many animals now display biological defenses against radiation. Some species produce higher levels of antioxidants, reducing cellular damage. Others have shortened lifespans but breed earlier, ensuring survival despite increased mutation rates. Even the soil microbiome, bacteria and fungi invisible to the eye, has adapted, evolving resistance to radiation and heavy metals. The zone functions as a self-sustaining ecosystem once again, though its balance is built on genetic instability. To walk through the forests today is to witness a form of natural evolution accelerated by disaster. Plants burst through asphalt, birch trees crack concrete, and moss carpets the ruins of human architecture. It is a vision both awe-inspiring and unsettling, a glimpse of a world that thrives without us, but not because of us. Photographers who document Chernobyl often capture haunting juxtapositions. A moose wandering through a supermarket, a fox trotting past a rusted Ferris wheel, flowers blooming beside radiation warning signs. These images stir hope, but they also mislead. The zone is not a paradise. It is a mutation of nature itself, a distorted resilience born from tragedy. Chernobyl proves that life finds a way, but not always in ways we expect or would wish to witness. The Earth will endure long after humanity falters, altered, scarred, but alive. Decades after the explosion, people began to return to the zone, cautiously, curiously, sometimes recklessly. Scientists came first, armed with Geiger counters and protective suits. They measured radiation levels, studied genetic changes, and sought answers to questions humanity had never before faced. Then came journalists, photographers, and adventurers, drawn by the eerie beauty of the ghost city. Some, called the Samoseli, came not as visitors but as residents. elderly villagers, unable to leave behind their homeland, quietly moved back into abandoned homes on the outskirts of the zone. They grew crops, kept animals, and lived simple lives amid contamination. To them, the radiation was less frightening than exile. Today, Chernobyl is a strange mixture of wilderness and museum. The reactor itself is sealed beneath a massive steel sarcophagus, built to contain its deadly core for the next century. Tourists walk its edges under the watchful eye of Geiger counters. The animals have grown used to the rare presence of humans. Foxes approach researchers for food. Wolves watch from a distance. The boundaries between species seem thinner here, all living under the shadow of a shared mistake. The data collected over decades paints a picture both wondrous and sobering. Wildlife numbers have rebounded spectacularly, yet many species carry heritable mutations. The ecosystem functions, but beneath its surface lies a molecular legacy that could last for generations. As humanity peers into this living laboratory, Chernobyl becomes more than a cautionary tale. It is a mirror, reflecting our power to destroy, but also nature's unyielding will to adapt. Those who visit often leave in silence, struck by the coexistence of death and life, beauty and ruin. In the heart of disaster, they see a question written across the landscape. How many Chernobyls can the Earth survive?
Chernobyl is no longer burning, but it is not at rest. Beneath its forests, in its rivers, and within the DNA of its creatures, the reactor's legacy endures. What began as an accident of human arrogance became a permanent experiment in ecological survival. The mutated animals of Chernobyl are not monsters, they are messages, written in flesh and bone. They remind us that nature is both fragile and formidable. It bends, but does not break. It suffers, but continues. In the silence of Pripyat's streets, in the howls of wolves and the wings of dark-feathered birds, nature whispers a warning that no technology, no progress can exist without consequence. The Exclusion Zone stands as a paradox, a thriving wilderness created by destruction. Some call it a miracle of rebirth, others a scar that will never heal. Both are true. Every mutation, every adaptation, every life form that persists here tells a single truth. The Earth will survive us, but it will never forget us. Chernobyl is not the end of the story, it is a beginning written in radiation, resilience, and regret. When the Geiger counters fall silent one day, when the isotopes finally fade into half-life oblivion, the forest will still stand, wolves will still roam, birds will still sing, but their world and ours will always carry the faint echo of that night in April 1986, when humanity learned just how fragile its mastery over nature truly was. Chernobyl's mutated animals are not anomalies. They are warnings, living symbols of the delicate balance between progress and peril. And if we fail to listen, the next mutation may not belong to them, but to us.